Here we are again for another episode of the Hourglass Podcast, where family law and psychology intersect. Overall, the customs and traditions are likely going to be a bit different this year. You've got to decide, how do I celebrate the Yuletide season this year? Who do I buy gifts for? Who do I take off my list? Should I plan my festivities in keeping with the ones from years past? Will I spend my time with the same people? Will I go to the same places, prepare the same celebratory feast? Or will everything be drastically different? Professor Jessica Collett. She's a professor of sociology at UCLA and the vice chair of undergraduate education. One of her areas of specialty is family.
And so when you go through a divorce, both the parents and the children struggle, but the children, something has been changed in their life without their input. They are in a position where they feel like the rug got taken out from underneath them. And so if I were to give advice to people for what they might do, it's really to think about how can I include my children in the reconstruction of rituals? How can I give them some type of voice in what it is that we're going to do from here on out? What would you like to do? What is your favorite part of the meal, or your favorite thing that we did during Hanukkah or Christmas? And so giving them that kind of voice. Another thing would be to think about the values that you have about the rituals or the traditions that you have. What are the values that are embedded in them that are important to you? If it's really getting together with people who you care about, then finding a way to capture getting together with people you care about, perhaps not in the same way, but still realizing that same value that is so important and core to who you are. And both children and parents will find that if new rituals are capturing the values that they hold dear, that they're more, they're not better substitutes, that's not a good way of saying it, but they're just an easier kind of next step in thinking about that. Do you have a favorite tradition in your family?
You know what? My wife creates and maintains her traditions, and she tells me where to show up and what to wear, and what to do. So I'm not that big on the holidays, but my wife is amazingly huge on the holidays. Yes. And so we're raising two young boys, and they are going right along with her celebratory nature of any sort of holiday or birthdays. It's actually very sweet. Yeah.
So when I hear that you like to be the person who goes along with the flow, and that is something that you value, that you value, making this other person happy. And I hope that you don't get divorced, but in that instance, I would think about what is something that you feel would really make people happy, because that's what you like to do. And with your boys and their celebratory nature, then what I would recommend is that you find something that is festive. So for parents, what they want to do is really capture what is it about the holidays. You might not be a holiday person, as you're saying, but you are a person who cares about other people and their experiences. And so you need to find a new tradition that captures that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Now, you mentioned fewer people getting married.
Yes.
But just as many people are having children without being married.
That is true.
How does that change come into play in terms of holidays and customs and traditions and rituals?
Yeah, that's a really great question. I wish I had a great answer for that. I mean, the truth is that these concerns that you have about how to reimagine customs and rituals around the holidays are not just about people who are getting divorced anymore, right? It's about anybody who is splitting up.
Right.
And it's also, I think, important to consider that there are people who are still in a relationship, but for some reason cannot be together during the holidays. That could be because of military service or incarceration or work. And so these things that you're interested in are just important to all kinds of people. And I think that there can be less, if you have not been married, it can be more difficult sometimes to imagine exactly how you're going to do things post breakup, because we have words like ex-wife and ex-husband and custody agreements and such. And there are those things in couples that just break up, but it's less likely to be legitimated. And so it can just feel a little bit more awkward for families who are not going.
Okay.
Yeah.
And what, in terms of society in general, are having holiday rituals and traditions a good thing or a bad thing?
Oh, in general, rituals are wonderful. I mean, and we have rituals every day. We have rituals of how we say hello to one another, etc. They give us this kind of grounding. We know what to expect. We learn what values are important to us, whether we use those words or not. We come to understand that these kinds of traditions say something about who we are. And sometimes in a divorce situation, or when a child grows up and starts their own family or is on their own, they find that those holiday rituals actually didn't speak to who they were, and they want to imagine it. Maybe a divorce is an opportunity to determine what really you care about, what is important to you instead of just what was important to your mother-in-law or something along those lines. So rituals are very important. It's through rituals that we interact with other people, and that's what really sustains social life.
Sure, and so if you're someone who is post-divorce or post-breakup, and you're trying to decide which traditions and customs to keep and how to introduce new things, is there a best practice for taking that on?
Yeah, so the best practice is to think about what you value, what is important to you. So if you are a newly divorced person, single for whatever reason, you want to figure out what is important to me. This is a difficult time for you. You have just gone through this breakup, and it's really about evaluating yourself and figuring out who you are and what is important to you, and finding a way to realize that. You do also have to mourn that the loss of a relationship is not just the loss of that person. The loss of a relationship is the loss of things like these rituals, that it is the loss of friendships sometimes, that it is the loss of an identity. I went from being, Mrs. Brown to being Ms. whatever your last name is. And so I do think that you have to step back and you have to acknowledge that it's difficult. You have to figure out what is important to you. And if there are other people involved, like children, you want to ask them what they would like as well. And, if your child wants pancakes for, New Year's Eve or something, then just think about, what is important to me? Do I need to have the fancy hors d'oeuvres and the champagne, or can we have pancakes and hot chocolate or whatever it is that they want? Include them in and think about what's really important, and it will make them feel special too. And they might, when they're 76 years old, still be having pancakes on New Year's Eve.
Right, and it's and you bring up an interesting point. So when I raised my older daughters now 20 years ago, there wasn't so much focus on what do the kids want.
That is true.
It was my job as a parent to set it up and take them through things. And a couple different times today, you've mentioned meeting with your kids, talking to them, trying to figure out what the family's new tradition is going to be. Yeah,
well, I mean, I don't want kids to rule the world. Right. I'm not trying to say that. But I am trying to say that, the world has changed in the sense that kids are more important to who parents think they are as well today. Yeah. Okay? So when my own son, who's now 23, was younger, he was much less a part of who I was as a mom. My job as a mom was to take care of him and to tell him what to do and things like that. My friends who have young children today, their job is to really cultivate their children into these people and to be paying attention to their interests and their talents and all of these things. And so we just live in a different society where kids are more part of playing roles in families. And so especially if your child is used to deciding what you're going to do on a Saturday afternoon, they're going to be pretty startled if after a divorce they can't decide or at least have a say in what you do on Christmas Eve. That said, I'm sure any parent of a young child knows that kids can have input without them ultimately being the person who decides what that
Right.
input is. So you can
Right.
say, would you like broccoli or green beans? Instead of just, what would you like for dinner?
Right, right.
And so you can come up with some of the things that you
Sure.
would be comfortable with, and still have your children feeling like they have a say in what's happening. But you did bring up something that I think is really important as well, that has changed because of the importance of interactions between parents and children as part of parenthood today, and particularly there's been a change in fatherhood.
Yeah.
So mothers have always interacted with their children quite a bit, and cared and felt like they were mothers because of how their children
Yeah.
viewed them and how they interacted and what the kinds of activities they did, etc. But now we have this growing idea about sort of an involved father, and a good father is a father who knows what his child's teacher's name is, or what the name of the sports team that they play on the weekend is. It's somebody who plays ball or watches their favorite television show with their child. So because parents are more involved in children's lives, even post-divorce, that's expected. And so there is more co-parenting that happens, and that particularly happens on the holidays. So perhaps a couple who is divorced gets together as a blended family on the, during a holiday event, because what's important is these children and being there with the children, and they'll put aside their differences if they can, to come together and find a way to do that.
Where do you see any trends over the next 5 or 10 years? Are the holiday traditions and rituals and customs, are they changing, and where do you see them going?
Oh, that's a great question. I do think that, and I don't know of any research on this, but I do believe that there is just more flexibility in holiday traditions. We have more interreligious marriage, okay? We have more people who identify as non-religious, and religion is such an important part of many of the rituals that we engage in around the holidays.
Sure.
And so if you have somebody who is Jewish who marries somebody who's Catholic, they're going to have to kind of reimagine what they're doing for the holidays. And the children, used to have to decide on one side or the other. Am I going to be raised Catholic or Jewish? And what am I going to do in the future? But now there's many more kind of hybrid approaches to holidays, and I think that has opened up possibilities for families. It can make things trickier, right?
Right.
Not unlike when you were saying, you just do what your wife tells you to do.
Right.
If I, as a Protestant, in society have a particular way that I do Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, and I don't have to think about it, that's pretty nice. But, there is also something good about this openness and ability for people to make new traditions.
Sure.
And so it's the blessing and the curse, right, of all of this freedom.